Hello everyone, welcome for this second lesson on deep learning on graphs. So this time we will take a signal processing approach for studying graphs, and namely we'll introduce Fourier analysis on graphs. So like in the first lesson, we will consider one fixed graph, but now we will have various signals living on these graphs, meaning that each node will contain a value, and the different signal will correspond to different value. So the typical example of such one fixed graph with various signals is when the graph is a grid and each node corresponds to a pixel, and then the signal sitting on each pixel correspond to the color of this pixel in RGB, typically, so with 3 channels. But here we'll consider the case where we do not have a grid. Instead, we have a general graph and still various signals. So you can think of, I don't know, temperature given by sensors or traffic on roads. And we'll try to do typical classification tasks on these various signals. So the basic idea here is to try to implement a low-pass filter on a graph. The low-pass filter is something which is very useful in signal processing because it keeps the low frequency and throw away the high frequency. So this is most of the time a way of doing denoising, and we'd like to try to implement such a low-pass filter on a general graph. So in order to do that, we'll define the notion of frequency domain for graphs using Fourier analysis on graphs. And once you have Fourier analysis on graphs, you can define convolution on graphs. And you will see that here, contrary to the typical convolution that you are doing on the grid, where you definitely need to have the notion of pixel being on the top or bottom or left or right of a given pixel. Here, with no such indication at all, because you have a general graph, you are still able to define convolutions. So let's start with a very brief recap on standard Fourier analysis for smooth function. So this is just to make the analogy with the graph. So if you are not familiar with Fourier analysis, it's completely fine. The only thing I wanted to say here is that this f hat is a Fourier transform of my original function f, and you are taking something which is similar to a cross product over there with a very particular function, this complex function, which is a symmetric function. These are plane waves with a frequency, which is the xi variable here. And they have a particularity, is these plane functions, they are the eigenfunction of the Laplacian on Rd. So the Laplacian is this differential operator, and you can check very easily by taking the second derivative of this function that they solve this fixed point equation, which is exactly the meaning of being an eigenfunction for this operator. So from a very high perspective, the Fourier analysis allows you to decompose your original function f as a sum with this integral of Fourier coefficient, if you want, times this very symmetric function, which are eigenfunction of the Laplacian. So what we will do now is try to carry on with this approach for general graphs. And this is possible because there is a very natural notion of Laplacian for graphs. So my graph is G with vertex set V and edge set E. A is the adjacency matrix, which is a symmetric matrix. I'm considering only unoriented graphs here. So with a 1 at its entry ig if there is an edge between node I and node G, and a 0 otherwise. Now the Laplacian is this symmetric matrix L, which is defined by D minus A, where D is a diagonal matrix containing all the degree of my graph. So D is a diagonal matrix of the adjacency matrix times the constant vector 1. So this definition actually works if the adjacency matrix is also weighted. So instead of a 1, you have a weight on each edge. So why is it called the Laplacian? Well, first there is a very natural analogy with discrete derivative. So remember that the Laplacian is the sum of the derivative, the second derivative of f with respect to all the dimensions. If you have only one dimension, then you can approximate the second derivative by this formula. So this is the derivative just above, just below, and since you are looking at the second derivative, you are subtracting them and divided by h. And you see that here you are adding in each time the increment of f from x to the left and to the right. So if your graph is a line, you see that you have only two components corresponding to only one direction of the line. But of course, if you are dealing with a graph, you have many directions corresponding to your neighbor. And if you take a function f from the vertices of the graph to the, which is real valued, then you can check that L, the operator, the Laplacian operator applied to this function, is simply given by this formula, the sum on all vertex W which are neighbor of V in G, so this is this notation, of the difference between FV and FW. So if the graph is a line, you recover exactly the numerator here. And so this is one way to generalize the Laplacian to a general graphs. So note that here f indeed is only a vector, okay? It can be represented by a vector in Rn when n is the cardinality of the vertex set. So this f of v is just the vth component of the vector, if you want. Now some very basic facts about the Laplacian. So a simple calculation shows that if you take any vector v transpose LV, you have this quadratic form. So you see directly that all the eigenvalues of L are non-negative. The constant vector 1 is an eigenvector of the Laplacian associated with the eigenvalue 0, so which is the smallest eigenvalue possible for the Laplacian. And the last thing that is contained in this property is if you order the eigenvalue from lambda 1 to lambda n, then lambda 2 is strictly positive, so it's strictly different from lambda 1 if and only if the graph G is connected. So let's consider a connected graph for now on. So you have 0, the first eigenvalue associated to the constant eigenvector, lambda 2, which is strictly positive, and you are ordering all the eigenvalue in increasing order. then U1, UN will always be the associated eigenvector normalized to the first eigenvalue, so eigenvalue 0, eigenvalue 2, and lambda 2, and so on. Then you have a very nice theorem of Fiedler that is telling you that if you look at the nodes in my original graph where the eigenvector k is non-negative, so wk is a subset of the vertex in my graph, you look at the induced graph induced by this vertex set on G, then it has at most k minus 1 connected components. So if k is 2, this means there is only one connected component. If k is 3, you have at most 2 connected components, and so on. So you see that, remember that we interpret the lambda 1 if L is the Laplacian in a Fourier term. Lambda 1, lambda 2, lambda n correspond to the Fourier mode, so the frequency, and U1, UN to the basis of eigenfunction. And what this theorem is telling you is that this eigenfunction associated to small eigenvalue, so the first one, lambda 2, lambda 3, are relatively smooth and not varying across the graph, because when you look at their positive and negative part, they are almost connected. So here is one example for a random graph. This is a nodal domain for lambda 2. So in orange, you have exactly the set W2, and you see that it's actually connected. Okay. Now I'm increasing lambda 3, so this is again connected, which is consistent with the theorem. And then you see that it starts to be deconnected, so there is one component here, one here, and probably one over there for lambda 4. So, but there are at most 3 components. And then I'm increasing again, and you see that you have an eigenfunction on the graph that is varying more and more as I'm increasing the frequency. So here for lambda 10, you have several disconnected components, and where the eigenfunction is positive on the orange part, non-negative, and it's negative on the rest. So it's a little bit like the sinus or cosinus in a Fourier, typical standard Fourier analysis. So this also justifies the fact that this frequency, the lambda, which are the eigenvalue of the Laplacian, have a meaning in terms of frequency for your graph. So the lowest this lambda is, the less varying the eigenfunction is. So lowest eigenvalue correspond to low frequency. So let me summarize in one slide what Fourier analysis consists of on graphs. So if you have a connected graph, so only one eigenvalue equal to 0 for the Laplacian, you take the Laplacian, the lambda here is a diagonal matrix containing the eigenvalue of the Laplacian, lambda 1, lambda 2, lambda n, ordered in increasing order. And the U matrix contains U1, U2, Un, the eigenvector associated to the eigenvalue lambda 1, lambda 2, lambda n. So they are normalized. So U transpose U is equal to U transpose, which is the identity matrix. Now for a signal f, so on the graph it's just a vector of size n. So f being Rn, you can define its Fourier mode, the else one, by this f hat of L. This is just the scalar product of your vector with the else eigenvector of the Laplacian. So this is what we'll call the Fourier mode associated with the frequency lambda L. So you see that there is a big difference with standard Fourier analysis. Now the spectrum of my Laplacian is discrete, so there are finite number of eigenvalues, which is not the case in the standard Fourier analysis, where you have a continuous set of eigenvalues for the Laplacian. So in matrix form, you have that the f hat, so containing all the fl for all L, is just the matrix U transpose times F. So this is the Fourier transform of my original signal, f hat. And now it's, thanks to this formula, it's very easy to recover the original signal from the Fourier transform. You just need to multiply this by U. And since U transpose this identity, you will obtain the original signal. So in matrix form, this is written here. Or if you want, we did decompose the original signal f as a sum of the eigenfunction of the Laplacian with the corresponding Fourier mode. So now that we have a notion of Fourier transform on graphs, we can define convolution, because we know that this is a typical picture you have when you are dealing with images. You know that convolution corresponds to the product in the spectral domain. So this is what is depicted on this picture. So you have an image here. So this is a 2D signal on a grid. If you want to define the convolution, which is denoted by this symbol with a kernel to obtain something, well, what you can do is first go in the Fourier domain, so compute the Fourier transform of your original signal. Then instead of taking a convolution here, you are just taking a product with the Fourier transform of your kernel. You obtain here the Fourier transform of the result of your convolution. So in order to obtain this image, you just need to do the inverse Fourier transform. Okay, so for images we typically go this way, but since for graph we do not know a priori how to define this convolution, we can go this way by first going in the Fourier domain, then applying a simple product, and then going back in the spatial domain with the inverse Fourier transform. So this is exactly what is written here. The only difference with before is I'm defining now a kernel function. So the kernel here will act on the frequency domain. So it will take a frequency and output a function of this frequency. So even though this is a function from the real to the real, you see that since the spectrum of my Laplacian is discrete, only the value of the kernel at the eigenvalue of my graph will matter in the end. So now the operator tk corresponding to the action of the kernel is written like this. So this is a simple multiplication, as I said before, of my Fourier mode times the kernel applied to the frequency corresponding to this mode. So if I want to have a low-pass filter here, I will take a kernel function with a cutoff, and I will kill all the high-frequency part of my signal in this part, and keep all the low-frequency one. So in matrix form, this is just the same equation with a component-wise product. And so this is the convolution in the frequency domain. So now if you want to understand what the convolution is in the spatial domain, well, you need to go back and forth in the frequency domain. So this is with the U and U transpose operation. So here you are taking your original signal, you are putting it in the frequency domain, you are applying your kernel, and you are back in the spatial domain with this last multiplication. So if you take all this matrix multiplication, in the end you end up with this U, which is the matrix of the eigenvector of the Laplacian, a diagonal matrix where each entry is not anymore lambda but k of lambda L instead of lambda L, and then the U transpose. So this is very similar actually to this matrix, except that now the lambda, the diagonal matrix here, has been transformed through the kernel. And so this is why we are writing it like this. So k of L for any function k. And the definition of this k of L, if you want, is exactly this notation. So note that if k is a polynomial, actually, this makes completely sense. For a polynomial, these two expressions are exactly the same as you already learned when you are dealing with polynomial of matrices. So this tk of f is the convolution of my signal f on my graph corresponding to a kernel function k, which is general. So now what we want to do in deep learning is to learn such kernel. So one way to do that is to parameterize the kernel, and what people suggest is to use polynomial kernels, where the parameters are this theta k, and this theta k will be learned with the basic SGD algorithm, and L here is the Laplacian of the graph. So there are a few things I wanted to say here. The first one is why it's called localized kernel. Well, it's very simple. The Laplacian is basically a local operator. It's a local averaging operator. And it's very easy to see that if the distance between node I and G is bigger in the graph, is bigger than k, then L to the power k will be 0 between these two nodes, I and G. So if k is fixed, you see that this kernel will be localized in the sense that it will only take into account a part of the graph which is in a ball of radius k. Exactly like in computer vision, the kernel of your convolution is typically a small kernel, 3 by 3 matrix that you will that you will apply on your whole image. Now, in terms of computation, what you need to do in order to compute, so this will correspond to what people call the forward pass in deep learning. So the output of your convolution on a general signal on your graph is just k multiplication by sparse matrix. If you, of course, if your original graph is sparse, so then the matrix L is sparse, and then the cost is much smaller. Again, if your graph is sparse, then the n square number of possible edges in your graph. Okay, so this notation tk of f parameterized with this parameter theta is one way to define convolutional layer for graphs, where the theta k are learned with a standard stochastic gradient descent algorithm. So there is one last more subtle fact, which is how to parameterize your kernel. So here we took the naive way of parameterizing with polynomials which are just power. So the constant polynomials and x, x2, x3, and so on. But you might wonder whether it's better to take another basis of polynomials in order to compute this kernel. So remember that in the end, it should not really matter because you are learning the parameter theta. But in this paper, the author suggests to use a Chebyshev polynomial in order to compute filter for graph, low pass filter or non pass filter, instead of the standard, the naive basis of polynomial we just considered. So here is a reminder about Chebyshev polynomial. So you can generate them with this very simple recurrence where T0 is 1 and T1 is x, and then T2 is obtained by this, and so on. There are, again, an orthogonal basis for this measure. Okay. And of course, you can write any polynomial as a sum in this basis. So you can parameterize your kernel in this Chebyshev polynomial basis. And indeed, if you want to compute the CK, it's obtained as more or less the cross product of the K Chebyshev polynomial with K with respect to this special measure for which the Chebyshev polynomial are orthogonal. So there is one thing that is interesting to note here is that this measure will explode when you are close to -1 and 1, to the boundary of this interval. So the meaning of this is if you are trying to approximate a function on -1, 1 with Chebyshev polynomial, then you see that the errors you will make close to the boundary will have a huge impact because of this measure. Okay, so in particular, here, if you want to do a low-pass filter on a graph, which is this red line, you really want your kernel to be very flat here and very flat over there. So here because you want to keep the low frequency, and here because you want to kill the high frequency. So you want your kernel to be 0 over there. And the Chebyshev polynomials probably helps you to ensure this. So you see that the Chebyshev is a dotted line here. So you see that the Chebyshev polynomial is very close to the ideal low-pass filter, close to the boundary. So here, the -1, 1 domain has been shifted to 0 lambda max because I'm on a graph using this simple transformation. And here you see that the Chebyshev approximation of my function at a given for a given degree is very good both here and at the end. And it's not that great in the middle, but anyway you don't really care because there are not that many eigenvalue here of the Laplacian, so you will not actually evaluate your kernel for this particular eigenvalue. Okay. So there is another thing which is quite important, and we'll look at this in the practicals, is that the rescaling is probably very important in order to ensure the convergence of the deep learning algorithm, because it will make sure that when you are stacking convolution, the convolutional layer, you will have no explosion of the in terms of the operator norms. There is one last thing which has been introduced in this seminal paper on convolutional neural network for graphs, which is the notion of pooling. So, as you know, pooling is very important when dealing with images, and the author introduced a similar pooling for graphs. So here it's relatively simple and explained on this picture. So you start from the original graph on the left here, where the blue nodes are fake nodes, and we'll see why they're introduced later. So the author consider a clustering algorithm. So you can take indeed whatever you want for your favorite clustering algorithm for graphs. So in this case, it's Raclus. And what this clustering algorithm is doing is it's merging similar nodes. So for example, from this graph to this graph, node number 5 and 4 have merged to obtain this number 2, 0 and 1 to obtain this number 0, 8 and 9 to obtain this number 4, and that's it. And then from this graph to this graph, then 2 and 3 are merged to obtain this 1, 4 and 5 are merged to obtain this 2. So what the author do is from this clustering algorithm, they build this binary tree where you start here from the last graph with node 0, 1, 2. And then you know that node 1 has been obtained by merging node 2 and 3. Node 2 has been obtained by merging node 4 and 5. 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay? On this node 0, it has been obtained just by moving node 0 from the original graph, but without any merging. So this is why you are adding this blue node, which is a fake node, and this is this one node here, to tell that this 0 here has not been obtained as the merge of two nodes, but just it's a translation, if you want, of one node. And you repeat this procedure for the step between G0 and G1. So you see that node 0 has been obtained as the merging of 0 and 1. This fake node is obtained by the merging of two fake nodes. The node 2 in node G1 here has been obtained as the merging of 4 and 5. This node 3 has been obtained only by the translation of 6. So you introduce a new 7 fake node, and then node 4 has been obtained by the merging on 8 and 9. 5 is just translation of 10. Okay, so now you have this vector of dimension 12, while the original graph had 8 vertices. So you are adding these 4 fake nodes. And what you'll do for the pooling is just a simple max pooling on this vector for the 1D vector. So here what the author wanted to do is max pooling of size 4. So what you will do is max pooling of size 4 here. So taking the max on all these digits, 0, 1, 2, 3, then 4, 5, 6, 7, and then 8, 9, 10, and 11. And at the end here, you will obtain for this node 0 the maximum of exactly the 4 first digit, because these are dummy values that will not contribute to the max. This value here will be the max of this 4, 5, and 6. The dummy value will not count. And this value will be the max of 8, 9, and 10, because this dummy value will not count. So you see that there is no parameter to be learned in the max pooling layer. So you can construct, and this is actually how it's done in the paper, you can construct, run the clustering algorithm to construct your binary tree like that once and for all before the training. And then when you are doing inference or training, you just apply a very simple max pooling, standard max pooling for a vector in one dimension in order to get the max pooling on your graphs. Okay, so the last thing I wanted to show is this is result taken from this CNN on graphs paper. They looked at the classification task of NIST. So this is a standard digits on the grid, but instead of looking at the grid, they constructed, as you see, a variation of the grid. So this is 8 nearest neighbor graph of the 2D grid of size 28 by 28, so the original images, with weight given by this this formula, where the z are the 2D coordinate of the pixel. Okay, so you obtain something which is a bit different from the grid, and then they apply exactly their graph CNN with exactly, you see here the architecture. So this is the original architecture on the grid 28 by 28 with the standard convolution with 32 channels, pooling of size 4, convolution with 64 channels and so on, fully connected at the end. And here, when you are modifying the grid with this nearest neighbor graph, they apply the graph convolution with the same number of channels. So you have the same number of channels here, the same pooling, same number of channels for the second convolution, same pooling on same fully connected layer. And you see that they obtain almost the same performance as for the classical convolution. So this finishes the second part where we saw signal processing on graphs using Fourier analysis, where you have one fixed graph and various signals living on these graphs, and to be able to do classification or regression on these signals, thanks to convolution on graphs. Thank you.